Hey, what's up guys? Will here for GSM Arena. Motorola's new Edge Plus has been released to take on the best flagships around, which is no small task. Does it pack enough high-end features to be worth $1,000 or even 1,200 euros? Let's find out in our Moto Edge Plus review. These days, when you think of Moto, you picture a mid-range phone, but the company hopes to change all of that with the premium Moto Edge Plus. It brings a sleek, curved Gorilla Glass build that is reminiscent of the highest quality phones out there, including a tall wraparound screen. We like the Edge Plus's striking looks, with its shiny finish, squared-off corners, and sharp edges. The frame is made of aluminum and is quite thin at the sides to make room for the display. It does thicken out towards the top and bottom, and the bottom surface is flat enough to stand the phone up on a desk, if you ever wanted to. One thing we don't like here is that you don't get the peace of mind that comes with IP-rated waterproofing. Moto does claim splash proofing in the design, but they do that for their cheaper phones too. The Edge Plus's curved display is a 6.7-inch OLED with a 1080p resolution. This provides a pixel density of 385 ppi. Decent, but a bit less than some higher-res flagships. There's a small punch hole at the top for the selfie camera. This is the first ever phone from Motorola with a fast 90Hz display, and content looks quite smooth. Overall, this panel is decent. You get those deep OLED blacks, and there's also support for HDR10+. Colors are sort of accurate, but you do get a blue shift around the curved edge. For brightness, we measured 422 nits maximum, and up to 600 nits in auto mode when in bright conditions. This is good, though the Edge Plus still trails behind some of the competition in this regard. Under the display sits an optical fingerprint scanner. It's fast and reliable for waking up and unlocking the phone. For audio, the Edge Plus has a stereo speaker setup with a bottom-firing speaker and the earpiece doubling as the second one. The setup is tuned by a company called Waves to deliver high loudness and output quality. Loudness-wise, the speakers are great, scoring very good in our tests. Sound quality is definitely very good as well, but compared to the best out there, it lacks some punch in the lows, and the highs are a bit too harsh. There is a 3.5mm headphone jack, which these days is a rarity for a flagship, so plugging in traditional headphones is a simple matter. The Edge Plus's interface is quite close to stock Android 10, even though the phone isn't part of the Android One program. Everything feels quite smooth and streamlined, and almost all of the functions are provided through Google's apps. There are a few custom features though. Edge Touch is a bar on the side which can hold customizable shortcuts for you. There are a series of Moto actions. They're motion gestures you can use to interact with or control the phone. And there's an effect called Edge Lights, which lights up the edges of the display for things like notifications or when the phone is ringing. Pretty neat. Moto Game Time gives some extra control over the phone's settings while gaming, such as blocking calls and notifications. Game Time is not new, but for the Moto Edge series, it now allows you to add virtual triggers on the edge of the phone for in-game use. At the heart of the Moto Edge Plus is a flagship-grade Snapdragon 865 chipset. It provides both top-notch performance and support for 5G connectivity. The benchmark scores are excellent here, and performance in games is great. The phone does heat up a bit under heavy use, but we didn't notice any significant throttling. If you want to keep a lot of content or games on board, the Edge Plus has 256 gigs of storage. It's a decent amount, but if you need more, this isn't expandable. The Motorola Edge Plus is powered by a sizable 5000 mAh battery. It does a great job, scoring an endurance rating of 100 hours in our battery tests, regardless of the screen refresh rate. This is one of the best scores we've seen in this class. The Edge Plus comes with an 18-watt charger in the box, and there is support for wireless charging and reverse wireless charging too. Charging speed isn't too impressive though. With the bundled charger, we were able to fill the battery from 0 to 30% in half an hour. Yes, the battery is large, but this speed is still behind the competition. Let's move on to the cameras. The Moto Edge Plus has an advanced quad camera setup with a 108-megapixel quad Bayer main cam, an 8-megapixel telephoto with 3x optical zoom, a 16-megapixel ultra-wide cam which can take macro shots, and a TOF depth sensor. The main camera's large sensor is the same one found in the Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro. It bins pixels 4 in 1, so images come out in 27 megapixels. The quality from this cam in daylight is excellent. You get a ton of detail, and noise is practically non-existent. Foliage has a very natural rendition, dynamic range is flagship worthy, and the colors look great. You can shoot in the full 108 megapixels if you want. These have more noise and dynamic range takes a hit, and you don't necessarily get a meaningful improvement in detail. One of the benefits of having such a large sensor is that you can achieve some nice looking shots with a shallow depth of field. Or you can achieve this effect digitally through portrait mode, also taken with the main cam. These shots are slightly zoomed in at around 2 times, and are still 27 megapixels in resolution. They have excellent subject separation. The Edge Plus has this unexplainable behavior in auto mode, where images from any of the 3 cameras come out in 27 megapixels. This requires some major upscaling and it causes a noticeable loss in quality. This is most apparent with the telephoto cam, since it has to output 27 megapixels from an 8 megapixel sensor. Another quirk with this camera is that it's supposed to provide 3 times native zoom, but when you use the 3 times toggle in the viewfinder, the resulting photos appear to be more like 6 times, and that's achieved with digital cropping. There is no chance for a photo that's been digitally cropped and upscaled so much to look any good. We really hope Moto will find a way to fix these issues with a software update, because they rendered this camera plain useless. You can access the native resolution and zoom of the camera if you shoot in manual mode. These 8 megapixel photos are sharper and more detailed, though since they don't have auto HDR, the dynamic range is less than stellar. Moving on to the ultra wide. This one is the same as the Motorola Edge Non-Plus, and its images are nice, with excellent contrast and dynamic range, and lively colors. The only thing is that since they're upscaled from 16 to 27 megapixels, they are a bit soft. If you switch to manual mode to get a native 16 megapixel image, you get a boost in sharpness, but again you can notice the lack of HDR. You also miss out on distortion correction, so straight lines will end up curved along the edges of the frame. The ultra-wide cam has autofocus, and that lets it do some nice looking close-ups in macro mode. These actually come out in 16 megapixels, but for some reason they have a cropped in field of view. Now on to low-light photography, and here the Edge Plus kind of fails to impress. Shots with the main cam do have well-preserved colors, low noise, and well-defined detail in better lit areas. However, the shots are also typically underexposed, and dynamic range is rather narrow. Turning on the night mode reins in the highlights nicely, and gives a minor boost to the detail and shadows. However, the exposure still seems dark overall, especially compared to the bright night mode shots you see from competitors. Zooming at night will either get you a 6 times zoom shot from the telephoto, or if the light is really low, a purely digital 3 times zoom from the main camera. These are both in 27 megapixels, and as you can imagine, neither looks good. And there's no night mode for this camera. The ultra-wide cam doesn't have night mode either. The shots you get are barely usable. They're underexposed, soft, and noisy. That's very often the case with ultra-wides, but we've seen flagships that can make a decent job of it. For selfies, the Moto Edge Plus has the same 25 megapixel quad-bare front-facing cam as the Non-Plus, and images come out in 6.2 megapixels. These have excellent dynamic range and spot-on colors, and although there's no autofocus, the photos typically come out nice and sharp. A new trend with flagship phones is the ability to record in resolutions above 4K, and this also features on the Moto Edge Plus. It can record video in 6K at 30 FPS, and these look good. However, the quality is hard to tell apart from 4K video. Both 6K and 4K have good detail, accurate colors, and nicely wide dynamic range, so it's hard to justify the extra storage space you'd need for the higher resolution. For some reason, only the main cam supports anything above 1080p, and there are no 60 FPS options available. 1080p video from the telephoto cam is soft and a bit hazy, but usable if you need that extra reach. The ultra-wide cam's 1080p footage has okay detail, and colors are more saturated than the main cameras. Dynamic range is decent for this sort of cam. Electronic stabilization is available in all modes on all cameras, except for 6K. On the main cam you can expect very stable footage, while the ultra-wide may exhibit some focus hunting as you walk. The telephoto stabilization also isn't quite as effective. Overall, these are decent cameras for daylight shooting, though the quirks with resolution and upscaling leave us flat out puzzled. In low light, the Edge Plus tends to fall behind the flagship competition. So that's the Motorola Edge Plus. You get a beautiful curved glass build with a curved OLED display to match. There's a flagship chipset, loud stereo speakers, class-leading battery life, and a really versatile set of cameras. Alright, that sounds good, so what's the problem here? Well, the Edge Plus is going for $1,000 in the US and 1,200 euros in Europe. To justify that price, it has to be one of the best, if not the best choice out there, and there are some ways in which the Edge Plus just falls behind. You don't get full waterproofing, charging is on the slow side, the display isn't outstanding for a flagship, and the cameras underperform in low light. So overall, the Edge Plus doesn't seem worth going for unless you can find it at a discount. Thanks for watching guys, stay safe, and see you on the next one.